Hi, everyone. I'm Don Rooney.
And I'm John Timpane.
Welcome to the musical Innertube, the podcast born out of a mistake.
We once meant to introduce a soothing musical interlude, but we said soothing musical Innertube, and the name stuck.
On this podcast, we talk to interesting people about their interesting lives, jobs, hobbies, and passions.
Difference makers who really make a difference.
Our guest on today's musical Innertube is none other than Justin Timpane. He is my nephew and I his uncle. He's an actor, director, filmmaker, writer, composer, musician, podcaster, and producer. He started doing ninja movies, made a bunch of those, and recently has expanded his portfolio, making truly original, interesting films that include The Distance from 2020, and also that year, Christmas Cancellation. His latest production was as a producer, editor, and composer for the film The Strangle of Ivy. And he's also now working, getting tired, Justin, on the score for Darkstone Entertainment's The Rifters. Welcome, Justin Timpane.
It's good to be back, guys.
Justin, you and I were at a family gathering this weekend, and as it does between us very often, we were talking about popular culture, and you had some things to say about the state of movies. One of the things that you said was, I really still have faith in movies, even though there's a lot of stuff going on. So tell us, first of all, why you do have faith in movies, and maybe we'll turn to the dark side in just a moment. But first of all, let's stay on the light side.
Sure. I think that movies are, in my opinion, they're the perfect art form because they incorporate all different forms of art together. There's writing, there's acting, there's photography, there's music, there's editing. There's editing, for instance, an art form that was invented for movies. There are so many things you can get to do. You could watch the same movie, and I have. Star Wars in particular is something I've watched over and over and over again. And you truly could just sit down and watch the original Star Wars and just think about Marsha Lucas's editing and go, how did she save that film that when the original cut was happening looked like a disaster? How did Marsha Lucas step in and turn that into the franchise that we see today? You could do the same thing, certainly, with any one of Oliver Stone's movies, who that has incredible editing. Or if you want to do editing as it relates to narrative, you could look at Quentin Tarantino or Christopher Nolan, who often work with timelines that aren't necessarily linear. And that's just editing. Then I could turn around, let's go to Pulp Fiction again. I could watch that and just watch it for the acting and go, look at how incredible Samuel L. Jackson is here. That you could just then do it again and go, I'm going to do nothing but pay attention to the verbiage, to the dialogue. Then you could watch it again and go, look at all the shots of feet, because Quentin Tarantino loves feet. But you could, joking aside, you could absolutely just watch it for the photography. And this is what I enjoy about movies. This is why I feel like filmed motion pictures, but especially movies, in that they have clear beginning, middles, and ends. I think you could push that forward to also include miniseries like the fantastic Shogun that's on Hulu right now. That is just gorgeous. And you could just watch it over and over again to appreciate the arts, plural. Watching a movie is like going to a museum of varied arts thrown together into a recipe, and watching a movie that is written by, if I would take a writer that I really love, written by Joss Whedon, who is a garbage person, but whose writing is spectacular, and watch the way that he would direct something versus he wrote, for instance, the fourth Alien movie, which is directed by a French director who didn't understand what Joss was going for with the dialogue. And it's this really super interesting failure of a movie, but it's really interesting as a fan of Whedon's work to see how a different director handles the same screenwriting, and it's vastly a different experience. So I love watching the hodgepodge. You want to see what, when Scorsese started pulling in DiCaprio to be in his films, right? You go, whoa, DiCaprio's amazing. What happens when Scorsese gets a hold of him? Now you have a different combination. So this is why I love movies, because for 2 hours, and there's the emotional component. For 2 hours, and I said this yesterday, I had a particularly difficult time emotionally and personally yesterday. And as I was going to see the much beleaguered and, in my opinion, personally beloved Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, which I adored, I said, this is what I need. I need to, as Billy Joel once said, to forget about life for a while. And I came out of that film going, I feel better because I got to not worry about my problems. I had to worry about whether this evil Sumerian god was going to, in fact, freeze New York City to death. And stepping out of that, life felt just a little better. I got to take a break. And I think this is the joy of the feature film format, because it gives you, it's not 10 hours long and it's not a half hour long. It's just 2 hours, seems just enough to munch some popcorn and get yourself into a different emotional place. So for all those reasons, I adore movies.
What's so good about Shogun? You want to tell us in detail, what is it? What are the arts you're looking at in Shogun?
What do I like about it? One, it's brave enough to have all of the Japanese in it in Japanese and subtitled, as opposed to doing the thing where they are speaking English in a Japanese accent. They have it be in Japanese, which I love. The visuals are amazing. The acting is really, really good. Culturally, it's fun to explore. Yes, there's a little, it reeks a little bit of white savior from time to time, as did the original source material. But it is respectful enough to the Japanese culture that I think it does a really good job. So, and just compelling television, most compelling television I've seen in a really long time.
Let's talk about the difference between your experience going into a theater and being in the dark for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and coming out and feeling better after what you've seen, and watching something like Shogun on TV in your living room where you can hit pause and go to the bathroom or go grab a snack or whatever. Well, what's the difference in absorbing that material in those two different ways, do you think?
Sure. I would like to, if I can, to introduce a third variable into this conversation, which is my experience of also watching a movie in my living room, a 2-hour feature in my living room, as opposed to, so comparing the three experiences. The joy of something like Shogun specifically is you can put an in front of it. I can say to my wife, do you want to go down and watch Poor Things, or do you want to go down and watch a Shogun? And you feel like you're absorbing a chapter. And there's something really nice about absorbing a chapter. This show in particular, every episode feels like it has a clear beginning, middle, and end, and isn't just one big, there is a larger story and there is a cliffhanger at the end, but every episode is tonally different than the one before, and they congeal certainly, but they are all of a part. So I do enjoy the familiarity of watching these characters over the course of the 10 hours. And that familiarity is the main difference between, say, a movie at a movie theater and then a movie in my living room. I am a poor person to ask this because, as Johnny will attest, watching a movie in my living room is different than a lot of other people. I have cultivated, since I could barely afford where I lived, I had an unfinished basement with a pull down screen. Now that I'm at the age I am now, I've collected DTS 5.1 surround and 100-inch HD projector in a pitch black room that has been tested for sound. So my watching movies at home is a similar experience to watching it in a theater. As John has discovered, he's come over and watched a Star Wars movie in my house.
Absolutely. I have my hand up, and I will attest that being at Justin's house is very much like being in the theater.
and we delightfully had your sister, my aunt Colleen, here, and we watched American Fiction. So even movies that are not necessarily as visually dynamic, although I think that if you watch that carefully, it has astounding photography. We get the theatrical experience. So the real question becomes, yes, we have a kind of an extraordinary experience, but a lot of people have 60-inch TVs. A lot of people have. So why pay? Why go to the theater? Is it for the bigger screen? Is it for the bigger sound? Certainly that's part of it. I enjoy, especially comedy, especially Ghostbusters, which I saw last night. When the funny thing happens and you hear people around you laughing,
yes, that
communal experience just is different. There is, and I don't know if that's going to be true of the upcoming generation, but for me, it harkens back to that's what we did when my baby brother, who is not a baby anymore, was born. John took me to go see, of all things, Superman 3. in the theater to keep me away from the hospital room as my brother was being born in 1983. The next day, all of the Timpanes, after meeting my brother for the first time, went to go see Return of the Jedi across the street from the hospital. Like, being in a movie theater is a special experience that harkens to something back. You have the popcorn, you have the sound, and you're usually surrounded. I can tell you this, in my lifetime, I've seen hundreds of movies in the theater, and I've only seen 2 by myself. It's an experience that I share with another person. And if there's a full theater, sharing it with all the people in the theater, being there opening night on a Star Wars or on a Marvel movie or something, especially with Star Wars, when A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far, Far Away comes up on the screen, the audience starts clapping, they start cheering, and there is this dopamine rush you get from like, ooh boy, here we go. And I would liken it to, do you think it would be a different experience riding a roller coaster by yourself versus riding a roller coaster filled with people who are also screaming? I've done both. It's vastly different. There is a groupthink that goes into it, and a group feel, a little mellow mass hysteria that happens when everyone's together. And
that's good.
And I dig that a lot. So for me, I think there's still a place for the theatrical experience. That being said, as we get to the dark side, as you put it,
sure,
the need to go to a movie for the theatrical experience. I used to go 2 or 3 times a week, and I have a subscription to Regal. You can get this thing where you go to, a lot of movie theaters have it, where you pay $30 a month per person, and you can go see as many movies as you want. And it pays for itself in 2 visits in a month. And I used to go to the movies 2-3 times a week. Now it's 2 to 3 times a month, because I don't need it as much. So the question is, what gets me into the theater? And not just me, what's getting other people into the theater, and what are they staying home for? And how do these movies become profitable?
I'm in a situation now where I'm attending a lot of movies alone. And let's just take the ones that were nominated for the Oscars this year. I did see Oppenheimer on a big screen. Again, not a lot of people in the studio, in the audience with me, just maybe 3 or 4 other people. And I've seen that a lot now. When I go to the movie theater, there's maybe half a dozen people total. Maybe I just don't go at a right time. I'm not sure. But I saw Oppenheimer that way on the big screen. I saw Poor Things that way on a big screen. But I did see 2 of the smaller movies, The Holdovers and American Fiction, at home. And I saw Barbie at home too. And when I was in line to see, I think it was Indiana Jones, I ran into a friend and his wife who were taking their daughter to see Barbie. They were all dressed in pink. Everybody who was going into the Barbie movie was dressed in pink. It was interesting to me because just out of happenstance, I saw the big movies on a big screen with the big sound and the big artistry. And I saw the smaller, more intimate movies at home. So I don't know if that affected the way I saw them or not, but I did have an affection for the smaller movies because I was, I guess, more drawn into the fact that the smaller movies were in the comfort of my home, where I could just sit back and relax and follow the story. And I wasn't bombarded by that big screen chutzpah or whatever you want to call it.
What in a dark year for Hollywood, and it was, what a wealth we had in the Best Picture nominees this year.
We sure did.
In the most we've had in recent years. I would have been happy with Barbie winning. I would have been happy with Oppenheimer, which did win. I would have been happy. I haven't seen Poor Things. My understanding is that's incredible. I would have been happy with The Holdovers winning. I would have been happy with American Fiction winning. And even though the buzz wore off on it, I would have been happy with Maestro winning. These are, what a wealth that we got this year of really, really good films. And as I talk about box office and budget, I'll talk about that. But I think that Don used a really, really, really good word, and that word is affection. I think it's harder to have affection on a big screen. I think that it is harder to go on if you're going to watch American Fiction on an IMAX screen, I just think it's too big. And I think that you're going to have a harder time connecting emotionally with something like that. We watched The Holdovers and American Fiction, which I've seen 4 times now because I think it's incredible, here at home. And I will say that the affection that they engender can really be felt. As I was getting to the last like 15, 20 minutes of the movie, I started feeling sad in advance that I was going to have to say goodbye to these people. Because I just was like, why can't this be a series? Why can't this be a 7-hour film? And they don't have to do anything. I just want to hang out with Jeffrey Wright and his family. Like, that's all. I just want to do that. I don't care about the plot anymore. I just want to be there because I'm having such a good time being there. I don't think you can do that on an IMAX screen as much. And I think that is where the disconnect and box office budget becomes a lot less possible, and where things like streaming come into play in more definite ways.
Justin, do you think that the younger generations, I mean, when they go to the movies, which they probably do, a little bit at least, their parents have probably taken them a few times, right, when they were little kids, just to get rid of them for a couple of hours and have a sleep. I used to call taking my son or daughter to the films investing in a nap. But that aside, do you think that people, say, from their teens to their 30s, do you think they like the experience of going to movies, in the theater?
Yes. I mean, certainly. I think that when a movie is good, people who are younger will go see it. If you were to look at Barbie, for instance, Barbie made $1 billion. And that $1 billion was mostly people under the age of 18, 1.4 billion. That was a movie that for all of the incredible adult themes that it had, and it was a very moving film for my wife, for instance, very important film for her. But for mostly kids, it's still a kids movie, and people went to go see it to the tune of $1.4 billion. So I do think that they can have an experience. I think that, I think that there is room for giant budgeted, incredible films that younger people will want to see, and people in my demo will also want to see. But I think that the fact is there is no end. I mean, Shogun's on TV and it looks incredible. And all the IP that we ever wanted to have is sort of still around from our past, and the video games that we grew up are becoming IP, and the comic books that we read are becoming IP, and the novels we loved are becoming IP. And it's not just, I remember when a long time ago, I'm a huge Marvel Comics guy. I love Marvel Comics. And when I was a kid, Dolph Lundgren made a version of The Punisher, which later on became a prestige Netflix show starring John Bernthal. But Dolph Lundgren made I rented that 4 times, and it's terrible. But you know why I rented it?
Because you're a masochist?
No, because
I did see it, and it was terrible.
The Dolph Lundgren Punisher from the 80s? Yeah.
Yes.
Why? Because I got to see my comic book guy on the movie.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yes.
That's what I got to. Why did people watch Superman 4? Why did people watch Superman 4, The Quest for Peace? No one did. It failed miserably. But why did the people who did watch it? Or Batman and Robin? Or Ben Affleck's Daredevil? Why? Because it was a chance to see your comic book up on the screen.
Right.
Well, that doesn't do it anymore. You could it's my comic books are up on the screen, big and small. I love the X-Men. John knows this. The X-Men just released a brand new show on Disney Plus 2 days ago. It's not enough to just go, hey, you like this? Look, here it is. It's not enough to just show us that anymore because the Green Lantern movie is a perfect example of that. Sure. Kudos to Ryan Reynolds for never missing a chance in his Deadpool movies to just eviscerate
to trash Green Lantern. Yes.
in the closing scenes, in the post-credit scenes. So Deadpool 2 is a time travel movie, among other things. And at the end of the movie, Deadpool gets access to the time travel device that the character Cable used to travel through time, and uses it to go back in time and shoot Ryan Reynolds in the head when he's reading the Green Lantern script.
That is great.
Yeah,
that really happens.
That's a lot of confidence in your audience that you can do something like that. That's a real inside joke, right? Sure. That's going a long way to tell an inside joke. but that one is especially good. I like that.
Oh, it's really
That's
good.
really cool. We'll return to our podcast in a moment, but first, here's a soothing musical interlude.
Justin Timpane is an artistic renaissance man, producer, movie maker, actor, writer, musician, podcaster, and cultural influencer.
Justin has written and directed movies such as Ninjas vs. Zombies, 2008, Ninjas vs. Vampires, 2010, and Ninjas vs. Monsters in 2012.
He followed those up with Trek Off, the motion picture, in 2016, A Christmas Cancellation in 2020, The Distance, also in 2020, and Strangle of Ivy in 2023. Check out the Facebook page for Justin's production company, Endlight Entertainment. It's at facebook.com/endlightint. That's ENDLIGHTENT.
And now we return you to the musical Innertube already in progress.
Let me talk really specifically about a movie that we don't know how it's going to do because it opened yesterday. And I saw it yesterday. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire came out yesterday. And I want to use that and a movie that John will never see. John might get around to seeing the Ghostbusters movie one day, but he will never see Kung Fu Panda 4. That's never going to happen. Here's why I think these movies are important. Specifically, if you were to look, and I was talking to Dawn about this a little earlier, if you were to look at mentioning Indiana Jones ended up having a budget of somewhere between $294 and $374 million. Now, I want to break down for your audience how the returns work. But generally speaking, a movie needs to make 2 to 2.5 times its budget to get into profit. Why is that? I'll break that down for you. Let's say there's a movie that makes $100 million at the box office. Well, let's say $500 million because nothing makes that anymore. So $500 million at the box office. So let's say the movie has like a $200 million budget, right? So that $500 million gets broken down like this. If the movie doesn't make all its money up front, because the way that the movie theater deals work is that the studio gets like 95% of the money that the movie makes in the first weekend. And then there's a sliding scale as it goes into multiple weekends. So movies like Pulp Fiction or like Barbie that stayed in theaters for many, many, many weeks, as it got to like week 5 and it was still doing so well, you're now at right about the 50-50 split with theaters, and theaters are now taking half of that money. So once a movie like Barbie, Barbie made $1.5 million. Yes. But after week 5, a lot of that is just going to real cinemas. Right. Then you look at your worldwide, and there are tariffs on American movies that go other places. And the studios get a much smaller percentage of the money that comes in from your international gross. So that goes out. Then it used to be called prints and advertising. That's not really a thing anymore because there aren't prints anymore, but the advertising budget also has to get factored in. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the case.
That's part of making the movie. Sure it is.
By the time you factor that in, and that's not factored into the listed budget of the movie. And then you have the back ends where you go, yes, the studio should be getting stuff. But if you look at the last Mission Impossible movie, if it makes over $300 million, Tom Cruise is now getting like 18% or something of whatever it makes. So in order for a movie to break even, the general rule of thumb is that it needs to make 2.5 times its budget to pay for itself. So you look at a movie like Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and you go, okay, people go, it did okay. It had a box office of $384 million, but its budget was $295 million.
Oh. So
when you do that math, it needed to make somewhere between $700 and $900 million to get into profit. It made $384 million, and therefore it's lost about $400 million, almost $500 million. That movie lost the studio. And this is the problem. The Marvel movies are the same way. There was a movie called The Marvels. It did okay. It would have been a great box office years ago, but because that movie cost insane amounts of money to make. So why do I bring up movies like Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire, and Kung Fu Panda 4? If you look at the latest Pixar offerings, they're still costing, like if you look at Lightyear, which came out a few years ago, I was like, I think it was somewhere, I'm off the top of my head, so this might not be entirely true, but like it was upwards of $150, $200 million, right? If you look at Kung Fu Panda 4, the budget for Kung Fu Panda 4 was $85 million. Now, that means it really, if it makes $200 million, it's in good shape. And it's an aging franchise, right? The first Kung Fu Panda came out like 15 years ago. So the 3-year-olds who watch that one, they're all grown. You know, a new generation has to be able to watch it, but it doesn't have to have the explosive, it doesn't have to have the $500 million to get into profit. And that's sort of the way movies worked in the late 80s, early 90s. You had a bunch of these mid-budget movies and then your occasional giant, spectacular blockbuster. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, which I'm going to give you my review for in 1 second, cost $100 million to make, compared to, again, $295 million for Indiana Jones. It's probably going to make about as much money as Indiana Jones. The first one made worldwide $244 million. Well, that would be a giant flop. That's less than Indiana Jones. But for a movie that costs $100 million, that's 2.5 times. It's justified its existence. It doesn't lose any money and it stands to make a little. That's why you're going to see another Ghostbusters down the road. And I think if Hollywood's going to survive, it cannot bank everything on we're going to spend we're going to throw everything at the screen because nobody cares anymore. We've seen everything thrown at the screen.
Yes.
Like we don't care. We don't care about movie stars anymore. We don't care about the super mega famous guy who gets $40 million.
Yes.
We'll the stars are the characters now. And I think Robert Downey Jr. discovered this when he made Doolittle, for instance, because they'll pay they'll pay $1 billion to see Tony Stark, but they won't to see Downey do other things necessarily. And that's why Downey is now found where he belongs, which is doing incredible character work in smaller films, which is why he got the Oscar in Oppenheimer. You go, Oppenheimer's smaller film, Oppenheimer's budget, $100 million.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Compared to...
It was $100 million, well, that's all?
Yeah, it's $100 million. It made over $700 million worldwide.
Well, I'm here to say that Robert Downey Jr. was amazing in that. That's a great acting job on camera. I mean, he has about a third of the film mostly to himself in a way the story is told. The other thing I was going to say, so you're telling me, I believe that American Fiction had a teeny budget, like $10 million. It made $23 million. So is that good?
Yeah, I think that's fine. And the reason is, right, it cost less than 10. It made 22.5. It did have a significant advertising budget, especially for the Oscar campaign. So you have to inflate that little. So probably you're looking at a $30 million cost for that film. But how did you watch that film, guys?
Oh, I saw it at the theater. Don, how'd you see it?
Okay, yeah, I saw it at home. And that brings me to the next question, and that is, we're talking about box office take. What's the take when they then release it to home video or to streaming? What happens then?
Well, that is not factored into the listed box office take. And that's really important to know that a film like American Fiction, most people are watching this at home. Mm-hmm. I paid $20 to own the film because I intend to watch this film every year. I think it's a masterclass in screenwriting, and I just want to get more and more out of it. So if you look at like the sale to right now, I think Prime has it. Eventually, Prime's going to sell it off to Hulu. Then Hulu's going to bounce it over to Max. Right. By the time it's done with its rental, which it probably made 10, 15 million in rental, I would imagine that more people saw it renting it from home than went to go see it in the theater. And then by the time it gets streaming, this movie will rake in probably a good 60, 70 million. Keep in mind, there are movies made for 120 million. If you look at Extraction on Netflix, that movie never touched theaters and cost like $150 million to make. And they made money from it because it increased every time they do a major thing like that, or like the incredible Queen's Gambit series on Netflix. That like every time they do an event on there, they gain subscribers and they stop churn, which is the definition of churn is when people who have Netflix decide they want to quit Netflix because they'd rather have Max. So American Fiction is going to do just fine. Because, now here's the other thing. There are a bunch of films like American Fiction that aren't going to do just fine. There are lots of sales that were made at Cannes and at the American film market of movies with actors, I'm sure there's a Matt Damon movie floating out there.
Sure.
The Ferrari movie with Kylo Ren, what's his name? Adam Driver. Did not, light up the screens, right? These things are risks, but as the guy who, I think it was the writer of American Fiction, who was like, take these risks, because American Fiction, 30 million cost, 70 million it's going to take in, and over life, these prestige films, with some exceptions, like the really unfortunately ignored Tar from last year, most of these films have a lifespan. American Fiction is going to be watched in 10 years. People are going to go, oh, let's get to that. The way that people right now will go back and watch Good Will Hunting, because why not?
Yeah.
So it's going to make 100 million over its lifespan. And if studios are willing to blow, 5, 10, even up to $30 million on these films, and 3 of them fails, but 1 of them hits, then that's how Hollywood stays afloat. And you're not going to have 600. Think about this. Indiana Jones lost 20 American fiction budgets, 20 total budgets. They could have made 20 American fictions and never released them, and it would have been less of a loss than Indiana Jones had.
What was the miscalculation with that movie? Was it that they had decided that they were banking on a brand that was probably a little too old, or was it something else? Was it not a good film? Oh, what do you think?
Well, I think, specifically, if we're going to look at Indiana Jones, and don't let me go without talking about Ghostbusters, because I really want to. But if Indiana Jones, how did they fail? $295 million budget. That's how they failed. I saw the film. It's pretty good. There's nothing in that film that should have cost $295 million. The film that I saw could have been made for 150. And then it would have been, the other thing is that, it wasn't as good as the first 3. Really the first and the third. It's actually my 3rd favorite Indiana Jones film. I like it better than Temple of Doom, and I like it way better than Crystal Skull.
Crystal Skull, yeah. Nobody liked that one.
And I think because nobody liked that one, there's a bad taste in everybody's mouth, so nobody wanted to give this one a chance. Everyone I know who gave this one a chance walked out and said, I was expecting it to suck, but it's Indiana Jones. I got to see it. Now, actually, it's pretty good.
I had a good time. I had a good time.
Yeah.
When I was in line to see it, and like I said, I ran into a friend who was taking his family to see Barbie, and he'd already seen it. So he said, what are you seeing? And I said, Indiana Jones. And the first thing he said to me is, don't listen to all the critics. Don't listen to all the, it's a good film. You'll really like it. So
it's not great, but like if I'm to list Indiana Jones in order, for me, Heresy, it's Last Crusade, because I love everything that he does with Sean Connery. Then Raiders of the Lost Ark. Then this new one. Then Temple of Doom, and then the Grand Canyon, and then a 500-mile walk, and then Crystal Skull.
Okay, now, ladies and gentlemen, Justin Timpane gives us something that no other podcast has, and that's a review. Justin, review that movie for us, please.
So I think this goes to our larger question of how do you get people out of the theater? There's a great episode of South Park, which if you watch it, it's called Member Berries. And essentially what happens in this episode of South Park is the people in South Park get addicted to these berries that whisper things in your ear that make you remember things. So you eat them, they go, remember Han Solo? Remember Millennium Falcon? Remember the Ghostbusters? And I do think there's an element of that in Hollywood. I just saw a wonderful looking trailer for a new Alien movie. An Alien movie. Alien came out in 1979. There's a new Alien movie, but it looks great. And the director is a director that I've seen his other stuff. He directed Don't Breathe. It looks really good. I think it's Fede Alvarez. We like nostalgia. But we won't just take it. If you watch last year, the biggest flop of last year was a movie called The Flash.
Right.
It was a DC movie, and it was banking on nostalgia. Oh boy, was it banking on nostalgia. The year before, Spider-Man No Way Home came out, and it decided, what if we pulled in Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield to be Spider-Man with Tom Holland? And they had 3 Spider-Man running around, all the Spider-Man you've ever known. And it's a great film. It's really fun. It's really fun to see Tobey back in the tights. And you go, okay, that's neat. The Flash decided to do the same thing, and they made a piece of shit. Can I say that?
Yes.
A piece of.
Well, you just did, so I think we're done.
They made a piece of shit film.
Oh, you said it again.
Yeah, and well, I've seen it, but I would only correct you in saying that you didn't properly call it a steaming piece of shit.
Yes, and here's the thing. There is one good section of the Flash film, and it is the only reason I went to go see the Flash film, because remember Michael Keaton as Batman?
Yes.
And Michael Keaton is in it as Batman, and he's great as Batman. He's sitting there doing this great job in this terrible film, and he's just really good, and it's the only reason to see it. But nobody did, because you can't just say "member" anymore, because we've done it. We've done "member," and this film at the end, John, at the end of The Flash, he collides the multiverse. They have a ghoulish-looking CGI Christopher Reeve Superman flying around.
That's so original.
But he doesn't do anything. There's just this close-up on him as they play the dun da 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 dun. He's simply there to go, remember Christopher Reeve?
Yeah.
That's all it is. There's a criticism of the new Ghostbusters that says that that's all it's doing. I loved the prior film, Ghostbusters Afterlife. I am on record as saying, not because they were women, but because it's a terrible, terrible film. I did not like the reboot Ghostbusters that they had a few years ago with Kate McKinnon. But I really liked Afterlife despite the reviews, because while it did give you member, it was also very, it was respectful of what it was, and it tried to do something different. This film is a Ghostbusters movie. And that's something that the last film wasn't. The last film was much more somber, tried to make you cry at the end to varying degrees. It worked for me. This film is light, fluffy, imperfect, has a little bit of like little nostalgia baits, right? There's at one point, I'm going to spoil a small scene that's in the trailer. At one point, they have all the new Ghostbusters, Paul Rudd and the kids, running around in the basement of the New York Public Library with Dan Aykroyd as Ray running around with them. They run too fast and he falls behind. And when he falls behind, he turns, and the same library ghost from the beginning of the original Ghostbusters is there and looks at him and goes, shh, just like the original Ghostbusters. He makes a big face like, oh my gosh, and runs away. I delighted. It was great. It was a fun little 20 seconds.
Did you delight though? Did you delight?
I did.
You did delight.
I did because unlike The Flash, it was there, it happened, I smiled, and the plot moved on while they followed new characters and new themes, did things. There's a character in this film that is a ghost, a 16-year-old girl who forms a relationship, a conversation, talks a little bit about what it's like to not be alive anymore. What's good about being a ghost, what's bad about being. I've never heard this discussed in a Ghostbusters movie. This is interesting.
You would have thought it would come up,
Yeah, they stop short of asking the moral question of like, is it cool to be like taking people's souls and sticking them in a trash compactor? Is that all right? Like, are we all okay with this?
What up with that?
if presumably a ghost is what happens to us after we die, and we happen to be stuck on Earth, is it cool that like Bill Murray is going to trap us in a shoebox and stick us away forever? That's maybe, I don't know. But it's so ultimately, I would say ignore the reviewers. If you liked Ghostbusters, it's a Ghostbusters movie. It has the vibe and the feel and and it's funny. It's a little bit scary. It's really well paced. Is it great art? No, it doesn't have to be, but it's not just like, here, look, you liked this once, and people are criticizing it for that. And I think that if you maybe it's just for the fans, maybe it's just for the me's out there. But if you keep your budgets below $100 million, there's enough of us. Kevin Smith knows that. He knows exactly what to budget his films at, so that when he makes Clerks 3, which is I don't know if you've seen Clerks 3, it's wonderful and sad and his best film.
I think it's really good. Yeah.
It's devastatingly sad though. When you watch Clerks 3, he knows if he makes that movie for $10 million, he'll make that $10 million back. know your fan base, give them 50% what they want, give them 50% a twist they weren't expecting, something new, combine it together, keep your budget low, and your movie will succeed. Don't spend $300 million trying to regurgitate to us things that we've seen before just for the sake of seeing them again. And I think that's where Hollywood is failing.
I have to ask you, did you see Panda 4?
I did take the kids to go see Kung Fu Panda 4.
Okay,
but
but,
kids,
but there's a lot of movies one sees because one has children. Am I correct?
Sure. And I took my younger one. My older one was not interested, and he was the original fan. Kung Fu Panda 4 is fine. It's fine. Is it? I really liked the original Kung Fu Panda. I thought it was going for something new and original. And I think it's really hard to find a movie with the number 4 in it that's really good. It's really hard to find a really good part 4. And that being said, it's short, so it's well paced. It's really breezy. Jack Black voices the main character and does a great job. It has some wonderful musical moments where they have an orchestral version via Japanese sounding music of Black Sabbath's Crazy Train. That is pretty wonderful. And the movie credits close with Tenacious D performing "Hit Me Baby One More Time," which is also great. It's the jokes are pretty funny. The action's okay. It's the story's fine. Is it for everyone? No. Will parents have a pleasant enough time while their 8-year-olds are watching? Sure. They're going to have the Pixar experience where like, oh my gosh, it moved my heart. No, but is it better than most little kid fare? Would I see it over Paw Patrol any day of the week? And it doesn't need to do great because it only was $75 million. And that's sort of my point, is if you try to appeal too broadly to absolutely everybody, you are banking that your movie is going to be able to hit the zeitgeist better than the other movie that is opening on the same weekend. And unless you're Barbenheimer, guess what? One of those movies is going to fail. And so why would anybody spend $250 million making a kids movie right now when kids have pretty great animation on TV to watch? If you hedge your bets.
Well, I swear to Christmas, you have persuaded me never to spend $250 million on a movie. I refuse to do that. I promise you, Justin, I never will. Thank you so much.
That being said, if Hollywood wants to give me $250 million to make a film, I rescind everything that I've just said, and I will absolutely make the smartest move possible, which is to give Justin Timpane $250 million to make a movie. I guarantee you it will make $7 or $8.
And Justin, if people listen to you, they'd retrieve that really magical thing about going to theaters and seeing movies in theaters, because there is something magical about being with other people you don't know, all of whom are oohing and eyeing and laughing. And if people listen to you, I think they'd retrieve that. I think they'd rediscover it. So thank you for coming on the Musical Innertube again.
Of course. Let's plan this in the future. Let's have another conversation in August, and we can talk about the successes and failures of the summer movie season. I have a lot of things that I'm hoping for, and I'd love to talk about what the surprises are and what worked and what didn't. So let's revisit when we get there.
And thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
Hey, let us know how we're doing. Send us an email at musicalinnertube, all one word, @gmail.com.
Do you know someone with a great story to tell? Let us know. Send us an email or log in to our website, musicalinnertube.com, and click on the microphone in the lower right-hand corner to leave us a voicemail.
And while you're on our website, take a few minutes to listen to past episodes of the podcast. They're all there, along with pictures and biographies of our guests, blog posts, and lots more.
And as always, our thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for providing us with our theme music.